United States submarine base at Key West, Florida. A dispatch that quoted President Truman's press secretary, Charles Ross, as saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government that would give substance to the existence of such objects. Ross also said that both the Air Force and the Navy deny that such objects exist.
We're so dumb. I'm so dumb.
Yeah, will you tell everyone what happened?
Yeah, so this is part due. So when we record our audio, we do Patreon and that saves as a file, and then we do our main episode and that saves as a file. But they were both the same file somehow. So
Yeah.
I uploaded Patreon and the main episode, but they were the same thing. But I swear they downloaded from two different sources. And Noelle has seen it. We save it, it downloads into its own folder. And then when we save the other main episode, it downloads into its own folder. And then we clean up the audio and then do our like intro and everything, and it's square. I don't know what happened. This never happened to me before. We've been doing this for years now. No idea. I swear I had two separate files, and I took one and I labeled it Patreon, and then I dropped them both in.
What kills me is that like the Lavender Scare episode that we did that's lost to time and space, I had such a good rant at the end of it, and now I don't even remember what I said. And frankly, I don't have the energy to do it again. So that's just gone in another universe. Someone will hear that. But
you know what? I said nothing of substance, so I guess I get to redeem myself.
You can do it again. It was also crazy that for almost a week, because shout out to everyone who was like messaging us, like tagging us and commenting that like, hey, you guys fucked up. This is Patreon on the live episode. It did still take Chelsea 7 business days to delete it. So for 7 whole business days, my nuclear fucking crash out with full names and businesses and addresses was a public episode, and that was incredible.
You still have the logins to delete it, but when people are like, oh, it's the same, I went and I pulled the audio that I thought was the main thing, re-edited it, and then like redid it and re-uploaded it, because I was like, okay, here's the Patreon, let me just redo it. And people are like, it's still the same. So I was like making a genuine effort to just fix the audio.
This was just an elaborate scheme to fucking bring me out, dude. I was like, no way that Patreon specifically has been a public episode for a fucking week. It's fine. It's fine. You know what? And that's what I love. Sometimes you have to be shoulder checked that like the internet is forever.
Yep. So you're welcome, actually.
Fuck. And then last week I was traveling, so it's basically been 2 weeks, no episode. Sorry. So sorry. This is what you get now. So now you get to finally hear the Lavender Scare episode.
Yes. Finally.
After a
we're on and live.
Yeah. So actually, do you remember this part? Because when I originally had written this script out, I was like, you know, if like a few weeks ago or a few months ago when we covered McCarthyism and the Red Scare, wrong. It was actually, as of today, a year ago, a full year ago, we talked about it. So
insane.
That's also just like how deeply embedded like McCarthyism is inside of me that I think about it every day. So like to me, it was last week, but
yeah.
And then, you know, like we're reliving it currently with like anyone who's pro-Palestine being like put up to Congress and told that they're like an anti-Semite and tried and deported. So it is like happening all over again. So that's also probably why I think it feels like it was last week.
I just rewatched the Louis Theroux documentary where he goes into Gaza, and it's like he's like interviewing different Zionist nationalists who are moving in, and they're like, it's so interesting, the juxtaposition, but it is like kind of the same thing that we're seeing. That fits into, I swear this just happened, but that documentary is like 8 years old.
Yep.
But it's literally people, they're like, no, we had a court that said we could move in and we paid to move in here lawfully. And then you have like the Palestinian neighbors, like they went to a wedding, came back, fucking Israelis moved in.
Their house is gone.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So
It's so fucking crazy. Yeah, it's just everything feels like it was both 7 years ago and yesterday because it just
yep.
keeps repeating and that's fucking deranged. But actually before I finish the sentence, hey, what's up? My name is Noelle. I am experiencing space-time continuums.
Yeah, and I'm Chelsea, and I'm sorry for fucking up the first, well, first for the monetization for swearing just now,
Yep.
and for or doing the real Lavender Scare, which was
Yeah.
erasing the Lavender Scare episode.
And you know what? That's exactly it. That was erasure. That was queer erasure, and that is the
That was
current
my
modern
bad. Yeah, that
Lavender
was my
Scare.
bad.
So,
That was my B on that.
so officially a year ago, we covered McCarthyism and the Red Scare, and in doing so, we found another overlooked aspect of that era. Legislation with titles like Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in Government was introduced in Congress. McCarthy's rhetoric about, quote, subversives in the State Department began to extend beyond communists to include queer people, stating, quote, sexual perverts have infiltrated our government in recent years, are perhaps as dangerous as actual communists. McCarthyism had people reporting their neighbors as communists because of government spread propaganda, and they were at it again, this time molding homophobia into government conspiracy, that gays and lesbians were going to take down the government. The justification for this paranoia rested on soft brain logic. The presumption that closeted gay individuals were vulnerable to blackmail by foreign agents. Mind you, this never happened, but it was enough to fuel government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded surveillance, interrogations, and mass firings.
And in some cases, federal investigators would follow suspected homosexuals home. They would park outside their apartments and they would stake out known gay bars to build quote unquote evidence for termination. And one civil servant was fired in 1954 and described being interrogated for hours without legal counsel and was asked if he had ever worn makeup, been in a Turkish bathhouse, or read Oscar Wilde, friend of the
Friend of the
podcast.
podcast.
And when he denied the accusations, the agent simply said, then why do so many people think you're queer?
Which is also a question I'm asked constantly. I want to say, like, for people on Patreon who know my thoughts about Oscar Wilde, while I still stand behind them, I recognize that Oscar Wilde is more intertwined with the queer community than I had realized. And for me, this is another I separate the art from the artist situation, and I don't do that with anyone else. I don't do that with anyone else. I think that's pussy. I think you're fucking lame if you do that. But I do now do it with Oscar Wilde. So
You want to know what's crazy that I just found out?
what? Oh God, what?
It's not actually that crazy.
Okay.
Oscar Wilde's dad, William Wilde, was is like considered to be one of the fathers of ophthalmology and
What's that?
otology, and he was a big dude involved in the census, but otology is for your ears, and
Okay.
then ophthalmology is for your eyes.
Wow.
So he came from excellence.
Yeah, he really said, I need you to hear and see me. And I said, no. Um,
And his dad's like, bet.
yeah, he said,
That's
I'm
what
gonna make
happened.
you. I'm gonna literally make you. While anti-communist hysteria was referred to as the Red Scare, this intersection of stank-sanctioned queerphobia masquerading as patriotism became known as the Lavender Scare, a less publicized yet equally insane Fed-sponsored American witch hunt. Seeing headlines like, quote, Hill and Weary study hears there are 3,500 deviants in government agencies. And when they reference deviants, they mean just queer people.
Yeah. And this wave of purges was so intense that between 1947 and 1950 alone, over 1,700 applicants were denied federal jobs due to allegations of homosexuality. And this was even before a little something something that Eisenhower did took full effect. But I know we'll jump into that later.
Going back to try and understand the roots of the term lavender gets you a few places. Lavender itself is a blend of blue and pink, colors associated with masculinity and femininity in Western cultures, making it a subtle visual cue for blurring of the gender binary. Before open discussions of LGBTQ plus identities were safe, color-coded, and I mean I say that with an asterisk because even today we're going back in time. Um, Color-coded cues offered a discrete form of signaling to each other. Lavender, used in fashion, accessories, and flowers, quietly signaled queerness, particularly among men. Another color code made popular by best friend of the podcast, Oscar Wilde, was the green carnation on the lapel, which also makes the song We're in Love by Boy Genius even more beautiful. So listen to that. Anyway, um, writers and artists use lavender symbolically in literature and theater. Early 20th century works often used references to lavender or its scent to subtly hint at a character's effeminacy or queerness, a coded wink to those, quote, in the know. Which brings us back to the 1950s. The US government and media weaponized lavender as a derogatory term. Accusations of being part of the, quote, lavender menace were intended to equate homosexuality with a threat to national morality and security. So let's talk timelines. In 1947, President Harry S. Truman signs Executive Order 9835, establishing a loyalty program for federal employees. While not initially explicit, it facilitated investigations into, quote, disloyal behavior, which later included homosexuality. 1950, geez, I said 1950 and deputy at the same time there. 1950, Deputy Undersecretary of State John Purifoy, who fucking cares,
Yeah.
testifies that 91 homosexuals had been fired from the State Department, directly linking queerness to national security risk.
Also in 1950, Republican National Chairman Guy Gabrielson, the worst name, infamously stated that sexual perverts who have infiltrated our government in recent years were perhaps as dangerous as the actual communists.
It's also funny to think that like queer people in communism is still like, you know, like peanut butter and jelly.
At the forefront of what everyone's worried about right now.
Yep. How history repeats itself.
God, how can I support gay communists? That's what I want to know.
That's what I want to know. I want to know, where do I support the game communist agenda?
Merch idea, the hammer and sickle, but like gasified and like lavendered out.
And have it say, support your local gay communists.
Yeah, this is the queer agenda.
Oh my God.
Oh no, what would it be like? Queer comrade. I bet we could mesh the gay agenda with seize the means of production together.
Let me think. Let me chew on that. Also, email us, DM us if you have any ideas.
Yes, please.
Anyway, 1953, President Eisenhower signs Executive Order 10450, explicitly barring sexual perversion, i.e., homosexuality, as grounds for denying federal employment or security clearances. This marked the legal codification of the Lavender Scare.
And under EO 10450, vague moralistic language like notoriously disgraceful conduct and sexual perversion gave federal agencies enormous leeway to fire suspected queer employees without needing any concrete evidence.
And again, because history repeats itself, this is similar to what we're seeing currently, and not just rhetoric, but legal proceedings and legislation happening where they keep the language intentionally vague so that they can cast the biggest net and catch, like, quote unquote, catch as many people as they can. When they leave shit vague, it allows for it to reach everyone and anyone that they need at that time. And what we talked about previously, and then in the Lost to Time and Space episode of this, was the legislation that was passed for voting.
We lost our right. No, you and I were good because we didn't change our names. That's it. Oh, it's all coming back to me.
Yeah. So, Chelsea, will you look up what the legislation is called specifically? But it was passed, unfortunately. It was presented and passed recently, that your birth certificate name has to match your like ID to vote. And this was probably created to hurt like immigrants and queer people, specifically like trans individuals, right? Because like you would change your name and they're like, you can't vote. But
Yep.
because Republicans are lead paint eaters, I don't even want to say unintentionally. They probably did do it intentionally. If we're being so fucking real with ourselves, that, if you couldn't have figured it out by now, also affects people who take the last name of their partners.
Yep.
So a lot of, because there is a bit of a modernist leaning for people, specifically like cis women, to not take their husbands' last names. It's like kind of a norm that's happening. I didn't do it. Chelsea didn't do it. We know a fair amount of people who haven't done it. And peace and love to you if you did. I think that's cunty too. But um, to say that like Republican cis women in heterosexual relationships who changed their last name immediately after getting married, the ones who probably voted for this thinking that they were just attacking trans individuals, have now shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, so specifically, this is from 19thnews.org. The US House has passed a bill that voting rights groups have repeatedly warned would make it harder for millions of Americans, including married women, to vote. It was the Republican controlled House on Thursday voted for the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, otherwise known as the SAFE Act. The legislation aims to block non citizens from voting, which is already illegal and rare. But now it requires that an individual has to present in person a passport, birth certificate, or other citizenship document when registering to vote or updating their voter registration information, meaning that if you have those documents and they don't match because you've changed your name, then you can't vote anymore.
You can't vote.
An estimated 69 million American women and 4 million men do not have a birth certificate that matches their current legal name.
And that's dystopia, girl. But yeah, it's just interesting, right? Interesting how we just keep
so
repeating.
crazy.
And I will also say that there was like a bunch of groups like fighting that legislation to be like at least make like an addendum to it that like and they literally said no, go fuck yourself. So
yeah, and now it's
here. 1953 to 1961. Under Executive Order 10450, the government conducted hundreds of thousands of security investigations, and heavy fucking quotations. Over 5,000 federal employees were fired or forced to resign due to suspected homosexuality during this period. One of those federal employees was Frank Kameny, a 32-year-old astronomer with a PhD from Harvard working for the U.S. Army Map Service in Washington, D.C.
And then another woman in 1956 was working as a translator for the Department of Defense, and she was summoned into an anonymous office. She was asked flatly if she had ever shared a bed with another woman. And when she refused to answer, the investigator leaned in and said, "Silence is admission." Her name was printed in the congressional record. Her family disowned her, and within a month, she died by suicide. And no charges were ever filed, and no apology was ever issued. And the U.S. Civil Service Commission created an entire investigative framework to root out these sexual deviates. And investigators might flag something as minor as a man's voice being too high pitched, or whether a woman was unmarried past a certain age.
Investigators were digging into the personal lives of federal employees, asking invasive questions about their friendships, their social habits, and even their private relationships. They were interviewing neighbors, colleagues, and anyone who might have the slightest bit of information or suspicion about someone's sexual orientation.
And one clerk at the Commerce Department described how investigators not only questioned him, but tracked down his college roommate, someone he hadn't even spoken to in years, and threatened the roommate with exposure if he didn't provide testimony. And the roommate later recalled that they asked me how many times I had seen him undress. They asked me what his pajamas looked like. And I told them, this is insane. So they replied with, then you must be hiding something too.
It's so insane. Yeah, it's literally just like Red Scare shit, like if you testify that someone else is a communist, we won't say that you're a communist. And so
And
it's just like a never-ending chain of lies.
how many times have you had a roommate where you have seen them just fully nude as the day is long and it has meant nothing? Like, oh
Also,
my
if you
God.
went to like a public school and had like PE, you
Oh, right?
also like saw people of like changing and whatever in front of you. It's so stupid.
Oh, I went to school with a kid who was wearing his sister's underwear one day because his mom was like, I'm not doing laundry. You've been a shithead. And he had to go to school wearing his sister's underwear.
It's so fucking
Like,
insane.
and you know what? He rocked it and they looked great and everybody loved him more for it.
And good, they should.
Yep.
Um, Going back to our friend Frank from above, during their surveillance, they discovered that Frank had been arrested in 1956 in San Francisco for, quote, lewd conduct. He was attending a meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Berkeley. After the conference concluded, he went to use a bus terminal restroom. Unbeknownst to Frank, the San Francisco Police Department's Vice Squad was conducting surveillance of this restroom, specifically to try and catch cruising. Two plainclothes officers were reportedly hiding behind a fucking ventilation grill, watching dudes inside this bathroom.
Yeah. Once again,
Being,
the 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 call is coming from inside the house
yeah,
because I have never been victimized by anyone in a bathroom except for these kinds of fucking men.
no, literally, it's also like kind of Looney Tunes-esque, or like I guess more of a offensive 80s movie like The Smoking Gun or whatever, like or Porky's, like that's what this is. Like it's so
Yeah.
fucking crude and weird.
It's that hyper masculine argument that, like, oh, you came out of your mom's vagina, like, gay. And then it's like, oh, also, by the way, to like find gay people, we're going to go watch them as perverts behind a grate in a public
Yeah.
bathroom and
So
wait to see them pee.
yeah, it's so fucking weird. And according to police reports, another man followed Frank into the restroom. The police witnessed an encounter where this man briefly touched Frank's genitals. The duration of this contact was described as only a few seconds. Frank consistently maintained that this touching was unwelcome and non-consensual. In a later letter to gay rights advocacy groups, he explicitly stated the encounter was non-consensual. And despite him being a literal victim of sexual assault, Frank was arrested and charged with lewd and indecent acts. Faced with the legal system and likely on advice of a lawyer, Frank chose to plead guilty to the charge. This decision likely stemmed from the need to minimize potential repercussions and get it over as quickly as possible, as this was a common arrest and charge on gay men at the time. His guilty plea resulted in a $50 or $55 fine and a 6-month probation period. He hoped this minor charge would not impact his growing professional career. And shout out to the proud plaintiff. This was, and it was, what is it? The American Civil Liberties Union and the Invention of Gay Pride, 1957 and 1969. This was a dissertation written by this guy. I'm not going to say kid, he's probably a man. Eric Matthew. For his doctorate of philosophy at the University of Cambridge. And he wrote this whole dissertation, and this is where I was able to find like this specific information. So shout out to him, great dissertation, and thank you for making it a public PDF for all of us to find. And anyway, as state-sanctioned government surveillance would have it, what he thought would happen, didn't. It did. He was fucked over by this charge.
Mm-hmm.
In October 1957, while on a work trip in Hawaii, Frank was approached by military service members holding a formal military recall from the Army Map Services, demanding his immediate return to Washington, D.C. When he arrived, he was interrogated by investigators from the U.S. Civil Service Commission about his sexual orientation. When asked to comment on information received by the commission that he was homosexual, Frank refused to answer. Investigators then presented evidence that he had lied about his San Francisco arrest on his security clearance form, citing disorderly conduct instead of lewd conduct. As a result of this investigation and his refusal to answer questions about his sexual orientation, the Army Map Services fired Frank Kameny in October 1957 and revoked his security clearance. Losing his security clearance made it impossible for him to find further work in his field with the government, which was the major employer of scientists at the time. So he fought back. And remember that there were no legal protections for LGBTQ plus people at this time for like doing shit like this. Like obviously for like um
Just,
discriminating against them and
yeah,
like
just defending
yeah,
themselves.
it was yeah. His appeal reached the US Supreme Court in 1961, arguing that his sexual orientation was not a legitimate reason for dismissal. Specifically, he argued that his dismissal violated his right to due process and equal protection under the 14th Amendment. Although the court declined to hear his case, denying, I don't even remember how I wrote this. Certiorari, I don't know if I can know. It's a
Yeah.
term, it's a legal term. His legal battle marked a significant, albeit early, attempt to establish sexual orientation as a protected category within civil rights jurisdiction, whatever. This effort, though ultimately unsuccessful in his specific instance, planted the seeds for future legal arguments and advocacy. Undeterred by the Supreme Court's refusal to hear his case, he became a leading activist in the gay rights movement. Recognizing the need for organized advocacy, he co-founded the Metatachi Society of Washington in 1961. This organization, a chapter of the larger Metatachi Society, played a crucial role in bringing LGBTQ plus issues to public attention during a time of intense social stigma and legal persecution. Through educational programs, carefully planned demonstrations, and persistent advocacy, the Metatachi Society of Washington worked to challenge prevailing stereotypes and advance the cause of equality. They organized discreet but effective public actions, seeking to create a space for open dialogue and challenge discriminatory laws. In 1965, Frank organized the first public protest for gay rights outside the White House and the Pentagon. These early demonstrations were precursors to the Stonewall riots of 1969. And while Frank absolutely deserves his flowers, it's vital to also acknowledge the inspiration or co-opting of his famous slogan, "Gay is good," was directly inspired by the "Black is beautiful" slogan from the Black Liberation Movement. Further milestones in Frank's activism include 1971, he became one of the first openly gay individuals to run for Congress in Washington, D.C. 1973, his activism contributed significantly to the American Psychiatric Association's removal of homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. And in 2013, Obama had posthumously awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recognizing his profound impact on LGBTQ plus rights. This resurgence of manufactured moral panics surrounding trans youth, drag bans, and school censorship that we see today has a striking and disturbing resemblance to the hateful rhetoric of the Lavender Scare. And also, I just want to say, it's not lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on you, but I'll say it one more time. He hits the Supreme Court with saying, like, specifically, you have denied my right to due process, and you are denying my right to the 14th Amendment. And they said, go fuck yourself. That's for us, not you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, there was some random fucking bald ass man who follows me and I don't follow him, probably in his 50s, who has a wife but still finds himself sliding into my DMs, replying to every single thing I post. And he had the audacity, like they always do, not the audacity to get on a flight to Turkey to fix his hairline, but the audacity to fucking slide into my fucking DMs and say some shit about how, because I was speaking to the mass stank sanctioned kidnapping of American citizens, even who are quote unquote suspected Venezuelan gang members, and how they were denied due process. And the evidence, in heavy quotations, is like what they were wearing, who they were hanging out with, a tattoo that they think they have. And they were kidnapped, black bagged, and deported to essentially like a PG-13 version of like a like I don't want to say like a it's not to that point yet. But anyway, state sanctioned torture facility that is in another state so they can specifically do horrific things to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, like, it's no matter who you are, what you believe in, especially like Republicans who triumph this as a win, like, how can you deny like you're such constitutional absolutionists and yet you're denying like the Constitution, you're
Yeah.
denying like these protections, you're denying the right to due process. It's something that you cried about for the past 8 years. And this fucking bald-headed bitch, had the audacity again to be like, well, they don't deserve the right to due process because they're not American citizens. First of all, sit on a broken glass bottle and spin, bitch. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
It does not say this is only for American citizens. It's anyone on US fucking soil. So yes, even in the instance where they were not American citizens, they still deserved the right to due process, which was repealed from them. And I I just think it's funny, and by funny I mean horrific, that since the dawn of American government, this has always been the case. Because the same thing happened with like slavery. They're like all men are created
Mm-hmm.
equal and deserve the right to freedom and liberty, whatever the fuck that bullshit is. And they said, asterisk, we actually meant not black
Yep.
people. It's like,
Yeah.
as long as this bullshit ass country has been around, people have been saying, I'm an absolutionist about this, this, and that, except for when it benefits you, the you that I
Mm-hmm.
don't like. And it's so fucking funny that with their whole chest, they'll go on national TV, they'll sit on their little YouTube vlogs and fucking cry about like, my guns, blah, 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 blah. And then meanwhile, they're like, oh, but not this, but you don't get that one. I get to have this unadulterated, unedited, uncensored, complete absolutionist version of like an amendment, but you can't have that one because I said so. And I'm really fucking sick of it. I'm so fucking sick of it.
Oh,
I'm so sick of
yeah.
hypocrisy and lying just being like the ultimate OP move.
Well, look at the pushback during the Me Too movement, where they were like, "This is a witch hunt" and all this stuff, and then now all of a sudden, like you have this literal witch hunt going against like trans people, anyone who's an immigrant, even not an immigrant. We're doing this to people who are actual U.S. citizens, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, "What? Yep, nope, they must have done something wrong." And it's like, do you not see the hypocrisy
Mm-hmm.
of you screaming against the Me Too movement, and then on the flip side, you're totally okay with word of mouth black bagging American citizens or
Yeah.
just black bagging people in general? Like, there's no standard of humanity, but you want to be at the pinnacle of this
Yeah.
standardless society. And you think
It's
that's a good spot to be in.
it's I know that we're supposed to meet people where we're at, right? Something we've talked about how we're working on, whatever, that we have more in common with those on the right than we do anyone in power.
Sometimes you got time.
But
Sometimes you have time, Noelle.
it like it's so frustrating that like these people and their beliefs and their opinions, they get to just be like OP with it because not only do they just fully back hypocrisy and deny it, they lie. They just
Yeah.
lie. They just lie. And how can you it's the ultimate move. It's the OP fucking kill strike unbeatable. They just lie. And then
Mm-hmm.
you go, "Well, that's not true." Actually, they go, "Fake." And you're like, "Damn,
Yeah.
how do I even combat that?" Like
Yeah,
it's
it's not a fair playing field when
no.
you come with facts and they come with gibberish.
Yeah, gibberish and fucking hypocrisy and lies. And then that's how they quote unquote win. And it's just so
Yeah.
insane.
They're
But
like, nah, I don't believe that.
they're like, that's
Nah,
not true. And you're like,
not true.
how is it not? Like when you have to go into the argument and they can just like say whatever they want and not have to like provide any information behind it. And then you come with a fucking dissertation, works cited, and
Mm-hmm.
then you spend all this time and they go, no.
Nah. It's like, fuck. It's like when
No.
my niece replies, "K" to
Yes.
a text. I'm like,
You're just like, damn, I don't even, okay, I just guess I take this L. But anyway,
yeah.
don't do that. But it's just, interesting how this has always been the case. It's nothing new.
Yep.
Anyway,
Where were we?
the current wave of drag performance restrictions directly stems from these propagated fears. Legislators falsely frame drag shows as harmful to children, promoting the baseless grooming narrative that links drag queens to child exploitation. Despite the complete lack of evidence supporting this claim, studies indicate that roughly 80% or more of child sexual abusers are heterosexual and over 90% are male. Drag performers, who primarily focus on entertainment, art, and community empowerment, are demonized and targeted with bans rather than go after the real harmful perpetrators. The intentionally misplaced focus is a deliberate distraction from the actual quantifiable problem of child sexual abuse, a problem that is overwhelmingly perpetrated by adult heterosexual men in positions of authority. A 2019 report cited that 90 state lawmakers were accused of sexual misconduct since 2017. In the United States, over 5,300 priests and other clergy have been accused of sexually abusing children. California alone had 757 credibly accused perpetrators named as of 2020. And a study of French Catholic priests estimated that nearly 3,000 perpetrators and 216,000 victims since 1950. And insurance data indicates religious organizations account for a significant portion of child sexual abuse claims. Since 2022, at least 21 states have enacted legislation to restrict drag performances. Currently, 2 states have explicit restrictions, while 4 others have broader, quote, adult performance laws that could be used against drag. In 2022 alone, there were at least 141 incidents of protest and harassment targeting drag events nationwide. Similarly, the banning of transgender inclusive materials and the censorship of LGBTQ plus history in schools echoes the moral panic of the Lavender Scare. These actions are based on the false premise that queer education will corrupt youth, mirroring the 1950s and 60s fear that exposure to LGBTQ plus identities would undermine society and bring the fucking communists. Restricting the visibility of trans people and LGBTQ plus history perpetrates this historical use of public institutions for their surveillance and exclusion of marginalized communities. Again, another hypocrisy of it all is that like conservatives are like, the government's trying to take my guns and they're watching me and they're listening to my conversations and they're saving my text messages. Meanwhile, they're like, let's go ahead and put the cops in the fucking bathroom ventilators so we can watch these people.
It's
like
fine. It's fine.
Direct surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the minuscule numbers involved, approximately 0.6% of youth aged 13 to 17 and around 0.95% of the adult US population identify as transgender. Yes, that's less than 1% for all of you people who can't fucking read. The NCAA president estimated fewer than 10 transgender athletes among the over 500,000 collegiate athletes. Some sources suggest even less than 0.002%. And despite trans people making up less than 1% of society, both on a national and state level, they are being ruthlessly attacked. The very lawmakers who champion small government and personal freedom are simultaneously enacting state-sanctioned violent and hate-fueled legislation that dictates the most intimate aspects of individuals' lives, which is a profound hypocrisy. The vast majority of transgender youth are seeking affirmation and support, not unfair advantages in sports. Anti-trans legislation in states like Florida, Texas, and Arkansas inflict harm on trans children, families, and medical professionals, exacerbating existing stigma and discrimination. The baseless narrative portraying trans people as threats to children and societal instability continues the cycle of government-funded marginalization, as seen with the Lavender Scare. The Lavender Scare serves as a stark historical precedent for how moral panic surrounding queerness and perceived national security threats unfold. The constant framing of queerness as a danger both then and now reveals a persistent societal tendency to view LGBTQ plus individuals as inherently subversive. While the targets of these moral panics have evolved, the tactics employed by governments and institutions, from security rhetoric to corporate appropriation, remain alarmingly similar. The fight for LGBTQ plus rights is far from over, and the community faces new forms of demonization and erasure in the current political climate. Understanding the parallels between the Lavender Scare and today's moral panics is crucial for recognizing these patterns and effectively combating discrimination through solidarity, education, and sustained activism.
Hell yeah.
And that's the Lavender Scare. And one thing I will remember from my rant last time that was lost to time and space was that this is all intentional. The small government that you so desperately dream of is not so small at all. And it's so big, in fact, that it has propagandized every single thing that you do and has predicted every single move you make and knows your fears and how to exploit them to its benefit. So much so that it knows, like I said before, that we, the royal civilian we, us,
Hmm.
Chelsea and I, you listening, have more in common with some like backwaters hillbilly family in the South than we do with Kamala Harris or Trump or whoever you want to fucking put there. And if they, the they in power, the they who owns everything, the oligarchy corporations that have their fingers in everything you do, eat, wear, and say, they need to keep us fighting and separated and
Hmm.
demonizing each other. Because if we all together realize that we have more in common and we want the same things, the same goals, we want children to not die of starvation and have clean water, and we think people should not be homeless, and we think that the healthcare system in the United States is flawed and horrible and evil, and we just want these like bare necessities of humanity. When we come together and realize that we are not like enemies in this, but stand together wanting the same things, then we become aware that it's this collective group in power, this small, very small select group
Hmm.
who is intentionally trying to divide us and intentionally trying to get us to fight with each other so that we can stay distracted and they can continue to just reap the benefits of us fighting each other. When you're so busy being afraid that your kid is being, I don't even know how they call it, like that your kid is being transed in public school, like when
Uh-huh.
you're waking up in a cold sweat that's happening and that's like your greatest fear, all of your energy and resources and like time and effort is being put into this like nonsensical hyperbole. They're able to just rake away your 401k. They're able to just suck up all of
Yep.
your tax dollars and put it into funding some goddamn bullshit that has nothing
Yeah.
to do with you, that doesn't help you at all. When you're so busy thinking that like this is the enemy, they get to hide as your true enemy. When you're looking left, they're going right. It's
Hmm.
it's like a bait and switch. It's a red herring, and it's so intentional and it's so obvious, and it's also so frustrating that a lot of the population can't see that. And we that's the whole point of the Lavender Scare, and that's the whole point of what we're seeing today with this like anti-trans legislation, this anti-immigrant legislation. It is all to create this falsified enemy based off of complete lies and disinformation so that you think the reason why you're not paid fairly and you're abused in your workplace is because of an immigrant or a trans person and not the fact that that evil fucking corporation is buying themselves their seventh fucking mega yacht as
Yeah.
you lose your fucking house. Not even a
Hmm.
house. You can't, there's not going to be
Yeah,
a
don't be
pool,
crazy.
bitch.
Yeah.
It's
What
not
do
even going to
you
be
think you
a
are at right
house.
now? Where do you think you're at right
Yeah,
now?
like your apartment rent has
Uh-huh.
gone up for the seventh time and your wages have remained stagnant. in Depression era style wages that you can't fucking you think it's immigrants is the reason why you can't afford groceries. Be so fucking for real. It's just like, but when they keep you so starved for everything, starved for literal food, starved for equality and protections and a balance of family, work, and life, when they keep you starved, of course you're going to fall for this like propagandized radicalization nonsense. And that's the point. If they keep you struggling, you will never be able to realize that like that's your real enemy, not the less than 1% of trans people in this country, not some fucking immigrant. No. It's the people who make those laws for you and convince you to be afraid that you should be afraid of. So that's that on that.
Yeah. Don't remember who the real enemy is.
And that's the tea of it all. So
yeah.
With that, I will give because I have to, unfortunately, I'm going to go ahead and give a Hail Satan. And then I'm also going to give a hail to um both in history and current day, the people who fight the good fight, the people who stand up to big government and call out the hypocrisies of it all, even when it means losing everything. Something that we didn't talk too much about. Chelsea mentioned one situation, but it's hard to speak on because there was no accurate reporting on any of this, was how many people lost their lives due to the Lavender Scare epidemic, if you will, who they not only lost their livelihoods and families, but a lot of them ended up taking their own lives as well. So there have always been people throughout history, whether they are named or nameless, who have been fighting the good fight. So a hail to them.
Yeah, hail them. Hail people who are speaking out, and specifically hail drag queens, man. Always been at the forefront of culture, and then hail the trans women, especially people like Marsha P. Johnson, who, are doing the good fight. And I just watched Paris is Burning again. It's been going on for so long. So I guess just like consume more queer art if you can.
Honestly, all art has been touched by the queer community in some way, shape, or form since the dawn of history and time. So just because legislation and governments want to try to erase it from existing, it never can and it never will, because it always has been and it always will be.
Yep. Nailed it. So,
well, let's get the fuck out of here.
All right. Bye.
Bye.